Okay, so as always, the meeting is being recorded and will be posted online. Welcome to the Web Performance Working Group 2021 edition. Happy New Year, everyone. On today's agenda, we mostly have a discussion around the memory measurement API, and then a bunch of issues to triage or check on that we have left from, most of them left from last year. For the next call, we're planning on January 21st, same time as today. If this is a problem, please let me know offline and we'll try to figure out an alternative time. I also need to reshuffle the meetings because we're now in a 1 week offset compared to the original schedule due to the holidays. Otherwise, one more administrative point that I wanted to mention is that I started to look into the field of client-side A/B testing and its performance problems. And it's something that I think has a lot of, there are a lot of issues. There's also a lot of misunderstanding between the different sides and the different stakeholders. So this is something that I'm planning to run a working group open meeting on. I don't yet have a clear date. Ideally, I'd love to run it within in a month or so. I still need to talk to various industry folks and see which of them can join us for that meeting. But just as a heads up, I would love to run such a meeting early February, either as like a replacement for our regular call time, or as an extended call, maybe for a 2 or 3 hours call, depending on the agenda that will form. And with that, let's talk about memory measurement. Ulan, do you want to present?
Hi. Let me start presentation. How's the audio, by the way?
It's good.
Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, I'm Ulan. I'm working on memory measurement API. And today I'd like to get your input and help with this naming problem that's been open for a while. To give some background, so the memory measurement API is just a method on performance object. It's called measure memory currently, and it returns a promise. And once promise is resolved, the fields of this result contain describe the current memory usage in bytes, and also describe the breakdown and attribution of that memory among iframes and workers. And the problem is that the bytes specific in the result are user agent specific. They are inherently user agent specific and cannot be compared between different browsers, right? But the naming doesn't reflect that. And we've got this feedback from Mozilla folks, and this is an issue in our repository. And yeah, and today's discussion is about that. Should we stress in the name that the bytes returned are user agent specific, or can we do that? And here are some options. Like the option A is to keep the current naming scheme, like assuming that it is clear that the bytes are user agent specific. Maybe an interesting detail here is that the memory measurement API is enabled only in cross-region isolated contexts. So for majority of web developers, this will not be available. Like they need to set proper headers. And for those developers that do that, is it ambiguous or is it clear or not? And if we decide that there is some web compatibility risks and we want to stress the naming, then what approach should we choose? Like, should we set the name user agent specific string in the name of the function or put it into the fields. So that's the main questions. And the options are ordered in order of my preference. Like I slightly prefer option A, but I think option B would be also okay. What do you think?
Could I ask maybe the group? I don't have enough historical background. Have we had this question come up in other contexts where any performance measure, while the API could be the same and the meaning could be the same, the actual results could be quite different across implementations? Do we do this type of making it obvious? Like, it seems like this would be common to more than just this one approach. Have we tackled that question?
I recall us having that discussion and that kind of naming before. I don't remember specific, like the specific example and where we landed on that. But it's a good point that we should maybe look at precedents from the past and try to align with that. On the question here, I think that we do need to outline that it's that the result is UA specific, but yeah, I don't have a strong opinion whether B or C is preferred. I don't know if other folks have such opinions.
So what we're trying to do for B or C is something like the CSS prefix. You know, when we used to have dash WebKit dash. Is that what we're talking about?
Not as far as I understand it, because dash WebKit was vendor specific. This is not vendor specific. It's just that the result can vary among different UAs and different implementations. So the API is the same for everyone. It's just that the result may be different, and we want to avoid developers comparing one to the other and saying browser X is better at memory than browser Y on that front, because that's not necessarily a fair comparison that people should do.
So the proposal is not to include the vendor name in the API. It's rather is to, in the API name, we want to make clear that it would vary between browser, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the UA specific here is not a placeholder. This is the actual proposal to name the API after.
Got it.
I think so far the performance APIs were mostly about time. For example, performance.now is also user agent specific, but since every invocation of that changes, there are not so many risks. Whereas with memory, like it's kind of another dimension, but the risk is that memory could be more stable than time. So then the users may be misled to believe that.
Yeah, my understanding as one past example is that I believe in WebKit, first paint is delayed until there is contentful content. And so the actual meaning behind the first paint is a little bit different than on other platforms. So while the API might be the same and the numbers are not directly comparable. And so to me, it seems like existing precedents that, you know, the definitions are but like things are rarely directly comparable. I could see why memory is a little bit more sensitive just because of just how much gets measured and how different the scope could be. And so this seems like a lightweight way to address that concern by just like making it super obvious and hinting at there's more that needs to be looked into. So seems option B seems very reasonable.
There was one concern raised with option B in the issue is that if we go with this route of adding UI-specific string in the name, there may be other APIs that appear that also start adding this string. Do you think it's a real concern? Or?
So the question I want to ask about this is the goal is to avoid web compatibility errors, right? So it's to avoid JavaScript developers taking a dependency on one specific UA's implementation. And originally this came up because we had the user agent specific types array in this API, right? So the idea is that, you know, a developer might do user agent specific types dot find, you know, looking for like window,
right?
And then dot something, and that would cause, you know, a null error. So with this one, it's a little less clear to me what like a web what a web compat bug would actually look like in this situation. Like, would it be a web developer like reading the amount of bytes and then checking if that's less than or greater than some number, and then just guessing, aha, okay, so, you know, I'm going to go into low memory mode, or I'm going to go into high memory mode. So I guess the question is like how likely that is, or if, you know, developers already have some kind of intuition that, you know, hey, this device I'm testing on here, this device testing Chrome might have a different number of bytes than that device testing Chrome, so, you know, I should watch out anyway. I know, just a question for the group, how likely that scenario might be.
What the use cases for the API, are they to change the behavior of the website based on the values that are returned?
The main use case is regression detection. So the results of individual calls, there will be high variance depending on when, at which point in the application lifecycle this API is called, and whether garbage collector already did run or not, like depending on the browser. So the main use case is to collect telemetry data and then detect regression. So the aggregated results are meaningful and individual results are less meaningful.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like there's any special considerations of this API compared with like if you're tracking paint timing in like all browsers that support it, right? Like it doesn't seem to me like there's like it's worth butchering the name with UA, something that I don't even know if developers understand what UA means in general. Like it doesn't seem to me like
so there's another option is to expand that. Yeah.
Right. And then the name just becomes super duper ultra long, right? Like so I personally I would agree that option A is like that's what I would go with, but it might be worth hearing from other user agents in the call what if they think that's reasonable as well.
I liked option A. It's simple and it's pretty obvious that different user agents might differ.
Yeah, like Nolan said, that there was, I guess, an alternative or past version where you literally needed a large switch statement to make sense of the result based on the UA, and then that would make, and it sounds like that's not the case. This is literally just forcing documentation to be read at each call site, which doesn't seem scalable or necessary.
There's definitely still the user agent specific types, right? If I understand correctly in the spec, but
Yes.
it's named user agent specific types
Right.
already.
Yeah. So the main concern is that, like, when interpreting the results, people will do compare the numbers in places where they shouldn't. Yeah, I guess I can see that, that problem potentially can be addressed elsewhere, and not necessarily in the function name, just by, having proper documentation which warns people against those kind of patterns. And as Nolan stated, there's no real web compat risk associated with that behavior. It's just an understanding problem, right? So I can see us going with A.
So can I take it as a recommendation of the whole group is to go with A, or have slight preference for A? Yeah.
I guess personally I prefer B because I think for other performance timings, like sometimes we do use them to compare between different browsers for their performance, like first contentful paint. So they also, even though like sometimes it might still be like a bit UI specific, but we still use them like to compare the numbers and see if there's a huge difference between them. But I guess for the memory usage, I can see it's a bit different compared to those ones. So I think to label it as US specific might make sense, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think it sounds to me like the question comes down to, is it better to document this issue in the API name, or is it better to document it in the spec and other MDN-like articles itself? My personal take is that we can much better describe the delicacy of the issue in a spec rather than in the function name. But not everybody reads specs. So
yeah, this may be a thing where we just need a better developer outreach from like people that are in charge of those things, right? Like it seems like adding user agent specific might help some people in like understand that it's user agent specific, but I still think a lot of people would not even understand what that means, and they would just still use it, especially the kind of people that are likely to just aggregate all the values across all user agents, right?
Yeah, I think I agree. I don't think adding user agent specific would stop people comparing different user agents.
Yeah. Is there an issue open on that front? Can you maybe link to that?
It is linked here in the slides.
Okay. Okay. So issue 11. Yeah. Yeah, because I think we on the one hand, yeah, other than Sean, I think everyone here are favorable of option A, but maybe we should give folks a bit more time to comment on the issue. I don't know if Sean, if this is like, if there's a like strong preference from Firefox, or if this is your like just personal opinion, maybe the best.
Yeah, it's just my personal opinion. I'll double check with folks and Mozilla and reply the issue.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe it's worthwhile to like note the group's preference in the meeting, but then let folks who have strong opinions give them a few more weeks to weigh in case there are strong arguments in favor of B or C. Does that make sense? Cool. Cool.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. So let me. Yeah. So let's continue on to talk about issues. First up, we have issue 51 from page visibility. Let me try to share my screen here. Okay, so this is an issue we already discussed multiple times. I think we had a good path forward towards closing it.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is a very good plan listed there. I just haven't had the time to poke at it. I still would like to get this one done. So there's no concerns, and I think the outline is good. It's just a matter of putting the time in.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so not a whole lot to discuss here. Yeah, just yeah, need to try to nudge that along. Then the next, like, do you have any, like, I don't know, in terms of timeline, or we can discuss that later. Yeah, the next issue with page visibility is the one that David Boken opened as a result, or right before. Yeah, we discussed this on the call last month, and essentially, I believe that where he landed, like during the call, we decided to, yeah, to bring during the call, we decided that he will run an analysis on the various states, and then where he landed is on adding an orthogonal document dot pre-rendering flag, or I guess and then became disposable event. Maybe I guess the main question that I would have here is if this is still like, should this be wrapped up into page visibility, or is this something that goes beyond that and should go into HTML directly? And then other than that, I'm wondering if any like folks from Apple or Mozilla have had a chance to look into that and have thoughts about this proposal. What do folks think?
For the HTML question, probably HTML. That's my intuition. I mean, I suppose it could go into either, but it seems it just seems easier to just directly put it into HTML because it's going to be completely separate from the visibility state, anyways.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well, because it seems we landed on it being orthogonal to visibility, and yeah. So it would be a bit weird to have it be included in the page visibility spec. Otherwise, have folks had a chance to look at that and form opinions? Alex, Sean, if not, maybe you can take an action item to take a look and you know, and come back to, like, on the issue or on one of the future calls to hash this out further. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I'll take a action item.
Awesome, thank you. Cool. Yeah. Another issue, the next issue on the list, resource timing 239. That's one that was recently opened. I am not sure that I understand what that means, but maybe we can just, you know, ask for clarifications on that front.
I guess I don't understand either.
Yeah. And a fetch start event. Oh, okay. I think I get it. It's not really related to resource timing, but get an event whenever a resource started fetching. I think this is the feature request.
Yes, yeah. So we have another open issue like this, which is like the fetch observer kind of set of issues. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we can just fold this one into the other open issue, and yeah, that sounds reasonable. Okay. So yeah, Nick, will you be able to just comment on this one?
Yes, I'll take this on and try to figure out the right place to merge it into.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Next up is issue 237 for resource timing. Are fetch start, connect start, redirect start relative to navigation start? Okay, so there's Nicholas or Nick, as you've already been involved with this. Do you remember what this one's about?
Vaguely remember this. I'd have to read it over again. I think part of the issue was that they, in like the load event handler, they were looking at the timestamp of a resource. Oh man, I'm trying to remember the exact specifics, but it was I think it was due to the fact that they were looking at timestamps in the load event handler itself, and if they just waited a few milliseconds till after the load event handler was complete, the math that they were trying to do would work out. But I don't recall if that's exactly it or not.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any spec issues in the issue.
Okay. Okay, so it's just a question, like
Yeah.
a support question of sorts.
Yes. Yeah, kind of like a how to do the math at the right time question.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything outstanding here. I believe we had, between Nicholas and I, we've answered his question. We could probably double check to make sure that he's satisfied with our response and then close it out.
Okay. Cool. That sounds reasonable. So if one of you can just...
Oh, yeah, I'll ping him.
Awesome. Thank you. Cool. Next up, issue 238. Transfer size might reveal HTTP only cookies. We've discussed it on the call, I think, a month ago. I think it would make sense for us to I think the conclusion from that is to remove, at the very least, remove cookie sizes from the transfer size. And yeah.
I would agree. There was also during the discussion some talk about just removing transfer size entirely, and we were going over like what were the use cases for people needing that versus the encoded body sizes, decoded body sizes. I don't remember when I was thinking about it later if we just discussed the fact that that's the only way to detect cache status at this point.
Yeah, I don't think we discussed it, but I think that is a valid point. But it might be worthwhile to just expose. So right now, I think there are two different states that this exposes beyond just the the header size. It also exposes, like, was this cached, and heuristically, was this cached and revalidated? Because for revalidation, the headers are, you have the transfer size of the headers, but not of the rest of the body. And it might be worthwhile to, if we were to remove transfer size, it might be worthwhile to expose those states directly. Because I think they're already on the one hand, sniffable and at the same time useful from a analytics perspective.
Yeah, for mPulse, for our real user measurement, we have a lot of charts and graphs and analyses that heuristically look at the cache state of a lot of resources on the page. So we depend on transfer size as much, a lot for that particular reason.
Yeah. Alex, I know that you all haven't implemented the transfer size and the rest of the sizes partially for the reason stated at the top of that issue. At least that's according to Ryosuke on the issue. Will you be willing and inclined to implement transfer size and the rest of the sizes if we were to remove cookies? Or from your perspective, do you want to avoid exposing transfer size altogether? And I'd also be highly curious about your thoughts on the various cache states.
That's a great question. I know for sure that we're not interested in exposing the pre-decryption transfer size. And eliminating cookies from the transfer size seems a little silly to me because it's a strange calculation of the transfer size of something that we've tried to.
Can you repeat that? You were cut off for the last sentence.
The most probably helps a little bit, but these days there's more in the non-cookie headers, and I'm just not sure that that completely solves the problem.
Okay, so you would be more comfortable with removing headers entirely?
I think that would help more than just removing cookies, and it would be easier to calculate.
Yeah. And with regard to revealing cache state and cache revalidation state, is there are there problems with that in a double keyed, double triple keyed world?
Not that I can think of right now, but I don't think that means there aren't any.
That's fair. So generally, if I hear you correctly, you would prefer removing the headers altogether, and then we can separately discuss the exposing cache states and whether this entails any further woes that we are missing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Sean, do you have any Gecko opinions on that front?
Sorry, I don't know enough to comment on this thing.
Okay. No worries. Cool. Yeah, and yeah, Nicholas, do you have strong opinions on the headers versus cookie question? Because
I don't think there are use cases for knowing not very strong use cases for knowing the sizes of the headers, right? I mean, of course, well, yeah, one use case is, yes, big headers are bad for performance, but I think I also agree that exposing the sizes, it's likely going to have issues, and not just with this problem, but some similar issues in the future. So we may just have to give up on that use case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, the main from a competitive, the main hurdle would be from a web compat perspective. This could be tricky in the for the folks that are using transfer size to detect caching. So, but yeah, maybe we can give that bit more thought and see how we can tackle that, mostly for the revalidation case, because we can continue to expose transfer size that is identical to encoded byte size, and that will enable folks to know whether nothing was fetched from the network, so everything was fetched from cache. But for the case of so either fetch from the network or fetch from cache, but for the case of 304 revalidations, they will have, if we remove the headers, they have a length of 0, which is indistinguishable from local cache hits. So this is something we'll need to think about a bit, I think. And potentially, potentially run a risk of breaking that kind of analytics and providing an alternative, and carefully nudge people towards that alternative path. Okay.
Or alternatively, is it hacky to make the minimum returned size be 1 if it's not local?
It is, but it's potentially solving the problem. Depending on what heuristics people are deploying for, if they're doing something that's smaller than 0. But if we return a fixed size, regardless of the header, we could say, that may be a good solution to just say, okay, headers are 300 bytes. And that could enable us, give us a good compat path forward without exposing information, and then we can figure out alternative, exposing the cache state directly in some other attribute. Yeah, that could work. Cool. Okay. Cool. Next issue, we have performance timeline, issue 100.
Just to clarify, are you going to comment on that issue just to make sure it's documented? Don't forget later what we discussed.
Yes, I can take an AI to comment on on issue 238 to summarize that. Cool. Yeah. Next issue, performance timeline, issue 100. So essentially, this is just a checkpoint to bug folks about a couple of failing tests. So generally, the overall tests look good. There are a couple of failing tests in both Firefox and Safari for performance timeline that would be great to have folks take a look at, so that we can potentially move performance timeline to move it forward. So Alex and Sean, it would be great if you could take action items to have someone look into those issues. And so both the performance observer disconnect removes observed types and the supported entry types test. If you can just make sure that it's getting looked at, getting some attention, that would be highly appreciated.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks. Okay. Now, performance timeline 168. This is essentially an issue that asks for better reporting for SPAs, which is on the one hand a known issue, but not one that has a very, the solution is not as simplistic or as simple as we would necessarily want it to be. Yeah, I think that given that maybe it's maybe we can I'm hesitant whether this is something we should close or just keep it around as a feature request for SBA reporting, but not something that is a blocker for anything short term.
I mean, it ties in a lot to the work that Michael's been doing and proposing, and he was presenting on from TPAC and stuff, right?
Yeah.
We're obviously paying attention to it. We just takes a while to.
I would say the way Yoav, you mentioned it, I agree. The specific request here is likely not feasible in the way that it was asked and the way that some of the discussions were here. So if we just turn this into a broad feature request to on the greater issue, then that's fine. Otherwise, I think there's plenty of ongoing work in several different places, and so I don't know that this specific bug is the catch-all umbrella. So I would also be fine with closing it and just putting it in as referencing it in some better place. I don't know.
Yeah. So maybe it's maybe you can take an action item to open a new issue that covers the broader ask, and then close this one while pointing to the larger, broader issue. Does that make sense? Awesome. Thank you. Okay, cool. And next up, we may even go through all of those today. That's surprising. Next up is 176, performance timeline 176. Nicholas, and the fact that the observer parameters are hard to feature detect. To me, that feels like a broader issue, which is the one that you mentioned this issue from. So where WebIDL needs a better pattern for detecting dictionary members. Other than, like, there's a try catch one that you mentioned here, and then on that issue, there's another one involving getters, if I remember correctly. Is that correct?
Yeah, they have a hacky way to allegedly be able to detect it, but it's probably worse than just using a try catch anyway. So yeah, I just think it would be good to have that in particular for type versus entry types, just because I'm not sure if all user agents now support just the single type, but in the period of transition, it can be pretty breaking if a developer moves just because it sees it working in one browser, and basically it just stops collecting data on other browsers that don't support this new parameter. So ideally, we can have a canonical way to feature detect dictionary members, but that issue hasn't really moved. So I don't know if we should continue pinging there or what's the right thing to do.
I guess the question is, like, what's the level of urgency here? Should we come up with our own hacky way to detect, like,
I think type is already supported everywhere. So because based on the tests you were looking at before, the failing for performance timeline, I would imagine that type works in all user agents. Otherwise, there would be more failing tests, maybe. Is type not tested there? I'm not even sure. Oh yeah, there's that observe type.
Observe type. So,
well,
not failing in Firefox.
Right, but that's the edge cases of having both or none.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the general case of observing with type is already supported everywhere. So from that regard, we can say that it's not urgent, but it may become urgent if we add something to.
Like if we were to add the bubbles flag that I've been pushing for, something like that. One way to.
Much requested, much anticipated. So that one would be urgent because that one would also break a lot of potentially, and it would be hard to know that one in particular because nothing would break without it. You just get different set of data. So
yeah. So maybe this is something that we should like keep the issue open, blocked on that external dependency, and then keep that in mind next time around. Then when we want to add another dictionary member, and then we can consider, doing something hacky in case the broader IDL issue is not addressed by that. Does that make sense to everyone?
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so can you... Yeah, I can take an action item to add like an external dependency label or something along those lines. Cool. And next issue, navigation timing 132. I am not okay. I haven't looked into this one yet, but
Also sounds a bit like customer support, or is there a package?
I think it was just clarification around the spec and when timings happen and stuff like that. So I think they +1 to my final response. So I think this could probably actually be closed out.
Okay, cool. Can you do that?
I will do so. Yep.
Awesome, thank you. And then, and we're out of time for just with just one to go. But a big one, I think, the worker start diagram bit. So we can keep that one for next time, probably. Awesome. Okay, cool. So, awesome. So thanks all, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.
Good seeing everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
Yo, I think I only